After the last election, I asked Democrats and people who oppose President Trump not to focus on the multitude of conspiracy theories that I knew would be coming, but instead to answer two important questions. One, why did 12 to 14 million Democrats stay home, allowing the president to win an election with fewer votes than he lost by in 2020? And two, what impact did the last 20 to 30 years of Republican voter suppression have on the election? Hey everybody, my name's Will, your favorite rural campaign and elections expert, and let's talk about it. I've explained in at least two videos why Democrats stayed home in the last general election. Well, now the numbers on voter suppression are in, and they should frighten every American that cares about the sanctity of our elections in this country. I'm going to turn this into a series of videos discussing voter suppression in this country, because the Republican suppression tactics that have been implemented over the last 20 to 30 years reached a fever pitch in this last election. And explaining everything that happened and the impact that it had on the election is sadly going to take more than one video. The numbers that I'm about to share with you were all put together by investigative reporter Greg Palast, and they include numbers from the following resources, if you'll forgive me for reading. An audit completed by the state of Washington, a study by the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, the Brennan Center for Justice, an investigation conducted by National Public Radio, a study by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and a study by the U.S. Elections Assistance Committee. All of these very reputable sources. Here's what the numbers showed. According to the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission, over 4.7 million voters were wrongly purged from our voter databases across the country. Over 4.7 million. For the first time since 1946, during the age of Jim Crow, I might add, vigilante voter fraud hunters in this country tried to disqualify over 300,000 voters. In Georgia, that number stood over 200,000 alone. Over 2 million mail-in ballots were disqualified for minor clerical errors. Nearly 600,000 ballots cast in precinct were also disqualified. Over 1.2 million provisional ballots were rejected and not counted during the last general election. And finally, and possibly most shockingly, over 3.2 million new registrants were either rejected or they were not entered into the voting system in time for them to vote, even though their registration had been completed by the deadline. Now I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret that the Republican Party will never admit. Similar to the video I did on the Southern strategy, there's been a big sea change in the Republican Party over the last 20 years. Secretaries of state in Republican states who were elected to protect the voting rights of voters in their states have actually worked tirelessly to suppress Democratic votes in the states that they oversee. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that the victims who are most often disqualified from voting are people of color. A study by the state of Washington showed that a black voter was 400% more likely to have their ballot rejected than a white voter. The U.S. Civil Rights Commission also found that in the state of Florida, 1 in 7 ballots that were turned in by African Americans on Election Day were rejected. Sadly, the truth is we don't count all of the votes in this country anymore, and it's African American voters who suffer from this the most. Now, as I've said before, those of you that follow me know that I don't like to use inflammatory language, but the truth is, since the 2020 election, the Brennan Center for Justice has found that over 30 states have passed over 78 laws making it more difficult for African Americans to vote. That's right, these are race-targeted restrictions. Little things like closing or shuttering drop-off boxes in mostly black communities, all the way through bigger issues like not placing as many voting machines in black precincts in our larger cities. And personally, what I think is most concerning is allowing vigilante justice in the area of voter registration. And what I mean by that is allowing Republicans, everyday citizens, to go into voter databases and challenge the voting rights of black people who live there. All of this harkens back to a darker day in American history after the Civil War and after Reconstruction. And any African American watching this video or someone who appreciates history and has studied it knows exactly what I'm talking about. In my video tomorrow, I'm going to discuss all of the final areas in which Republicans suppressed the vote, causing Kamala Harris not to win. But I want to close this video by just giving you the bottom line number. If you combine all of the different studies that were done and look at the overall impacts, we would see that had we not legally suppressed all of these votes, all of these registrations, etc., Kamala Harris would have ended up with over 2.5 million more votes and would have defeated Donald Trump by 1.2 million votes. Now, this isn't a conspiracy theory that we're talking about. We're not talking about ballots that weren't counted by the machines or were hidden somewhere under a table. This isn't the crazy stuff that the Trump campaign talked about in 2020. These are laws that were passed by Republican legislatures across the country to legally suppress the vote, and it has to stop. And I'm asking everyone, Democrat, Republican, Independent, people who aren't registered, just everyday plain Americans, do you believe in the republic that we live in? And do you believe in the sanctity of the vote? Or do you believe that the sanctity of the vote can be bastardized for political purposes? Only you can answer that question. My name's Will. That's the news from the back 40, and I hope you have a great day.